they didn't know either. I do, and I talked to people who didn't even know they didn't even know how to determine how many people came to their booth and who they were. And I had figured out.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy.
Hi, everyone. This is Jana.
Welcome back to Close Encounters. Today we're on episode 14. It's been a little bit of a while. We haven't seen you guys in some time. Everyone's kind of, is recovering from all the holiday breaks. But today we come back with a really, really important topic because in our business, was a very busy season as well for arts markets and booking conferences around the world. And I bring in today two wonderful colleagues and veterans of the business, Sepehr and David. Sepehr is joining us all the way from Tehran in Iran, and then David is joining us all the way from Southern California in the United States. Before we get right into our conversation, I'll just leave it up to the two of you to give yourself a little bit of introduction. I'm going to just start from the left to the right. So Sepehr, why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Jana. David, nice to meet you. Meet you. Thank you for inviting me to this really interesting program. I've been following your program ever since, and it was always very interesting for me, the topics that you've been talking. So I'm Sepehr. My name is Sepehr Sharifzadeh. In Persian, Sepehr means the sky, coming from the word sphere. And on a local layer, I'm running a theater. I've been running a theater agency for the past 9 years, trying to help artists for cross-cultural exchange from all around the world. And basically, I've been working with, initially I've been working with Iranian artists. Later on, I expanded my business to international artists residing in Europe. And on an international layer, I'm working as a freelance curator and creative producer to create events, festivals, curate talking sessions, different discourses within different organizations, and festivals such as Salzburg Global Seminar, the Festival Academy, European Festival Association, and Vrijstad Festival in South Africa. So, yeah, that's me.
Thank you. David?
Hi, whatever time of day it is, people watching. Hi, my name is David Belanzon, and I have been an agent and manager for a little over 50 years. It sounds weird when I say that. I started out in college booking concerts and producing events and dances and fundraisers. And then one day, one of the bands that I was hiring said, "Do you want to be our agent?" And I said, I had no idea what that meant, but I said, sure. And at the time, there was a local entertainer who was a hypnotist in San Diego, who I had known since I was a little boy. My cousin had been his musical director. He was probably the most well-known entertainer in San Diego. And so I called him up and said, "I'm now an agent. Can I represent you?" And he said, "Sure." And then I said to myself, well, if I have the best hypnotist in the world, I should get the best magician. So I picked up the phone and called Harry Blackstone Jr.'s manager and said, "Hi, I'm an agent. I want to book Harry Blackstone." They said, "Okay," because nobody else seemed to be. And then shortly thereafter, Harry fired his manager and asked me if I wanted to be his manager. And that's sort of where I learned a lot about our business, because Harry Blackstone Jr., in addition to growing up in the world of entertainment, touring with his father's show. His father was a contemporary of Houdini. He had a theater degree, so in theater management, and he had also been the general manager for the national touring companies of hair.
Wow.
So when I went on the road with him, I learned a lot. I mean, I can tell you, I even on some shows when the theater crew wasn't as efficient or there, I used to, in a couple of theaters, I actually ran a carbon arc follow spot. And so over the course of my career, I've represented all kinds of artists, and it's a wonderful business. And we're going to talk about conferences, and I think that to me is one of the best parts of our business because you get to meet people in person. Obviously, when I started, there was no internet and no cell phones and no FedEx and no fax machines.
Oh my God.
How did you manage?
This is going to be such an interesting conversation today.
When I was in school, our school had what was then called a Watts line, which was you could make unlimited phone calls. So I would, while I was working on my committee to book concerts, I would use the Watts line to call, because I could call over America for free. That helped. And it was just, and I went to conferences. I mean, I went to Billboard magazine had a conference in Los Angeles. I think while I was still in college, and there are people I met there that I still know today.
Wow.
So it's been it's a wonderful business. I've got to travel the world, and see lots of things, and all related to what we do. And I think I've helped a lot of artists as well. I also, so I don't forget, I wanted to, let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay. Can I share my screen or not?
Here, I will make you the host, right? And then now you can share.
Let me just see if this will work for me. Hold on, why won't this do what I want? Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So I just wanted to. Can you see that?
Yes, I saw the news, David, yesterday.
Yeah, I just thought it pertinent to our business and the conference and the discussion that the passing this week of Gary McAbey.
Yes.
Gary pretty much invented the Broadway touring business.
Yeah,
and
he did.
And I knew Gary for a large percentage of my career. Yeah. And in fact, many years ago, Gary sold an ice show that I was representing to Moscow. I think that was one of the first I know it was the first international ice show to play Russia. But he was always, cheery and helpful to anybody and everybody, and the outpouring of grief within our industry,
yes,
exemplifies, what can happen when, with somebody who's that loving to everybody in the business.
For sure. I knew Gary when I was working at Cami, and he was just he has a huge presence, but that wasn't, intimidating. He was like this huge teddy bear who just was always willing to give you his time if you needed it. And and that's what I'll always remember him, and it's so sad to see the news yesterday. So we definitely, I think our world, the performing arts world, certainly lost someone great and who has contributed so much. But, which also leads into our conversation today, just about what we do and about the meeting of people and networking and how the last 2 years really has changed, right? And how do we keep that in-person,
But I mean,
that in-person contact, right? When we can't, or what does that mean where you have, Sepehr, you're in Iran. It's not like you can easily just go to any conferences around the world. And that's also a bigger thing of I think we are at the cusp, right?
I think it's just to add this, and I want to add a question. First of all, thank you very much for these two great introductions, and two things for me jump out, which is first, it's a people's business. Yeah. So we work with people, and as you said, David, I mean, you met someone, I don't know, a long time ago, and you get stuck with them because it's this whole business. Everything we do is based on people and travel. So both travel has been taken away from us a little bit in terms of traveling in person. I mean, thank God we do have the internet today and smartphones and everything, so we can e-travel kind of. But in person is always different, like on a screen or in person. And this is, I mean, for me, it would be interesting if I just pick up those two things. How, from your point of view, how did that influence your work within the last 2 years, including all the, effort done by a lot of platforms at conferences to go online? So what is the actual situation right now for both of you? So what did change, and what maybe changed for the good, and what maybe changed not for the bad because it's too negative, but what made it more difficult? It's a lot of questions in one question, sorry.
Sepehr, you want to go first? And,
You can pick one.
Oh, well, the famous, very ancient novel, 1001 Nights. So if you want to begin this, it would be a 1001 Nights story to tell. But to in a way, go on with it as a jazz player, merging what Cindy asked and what you asked, Jana, it's been a roller coaster. It's especially on a negative point. I just say it in the beginning because it was very important for all of us in the office. Iran is good that David is actually here. So Iran, for the past 43 years after the revolution, has been under the sanctions and embargoes of the United States. And because of that, our banking, we don't have any international banking. So that makes our job in the agency much more difficult than any other. In several countries, they are under embargoes, but also Iran. So it makes it very hard because, first of all, when I'm bringing artists to any festival, I have to deal with the festival to get cash. And this is totally impossible. So now so after the COVID, our revenue almost got to zero because there was no touring, there was no funding here, there was almost nothing. But then we began streaming our shows through different festivals that were supposed to bring our shows in person. And then that brought up another hassle, because how are they gonna pay us when they when we cannot travel and they cannot send it in a, like, wire it, transfer it online. So okay, that put aside. That's the negative point, because that's the narrative that I think I usually say it in any panel that I talk about, because this is a narrative that people need to know in the world, that these things exist in the world. It's not only the European mindset or the white European mindset or the Australian or the Americans. Some countries, they are really having difficulty with putting their life and putting their energy and everything and their soul into this thing. So, and now going to the good part, it's been good for me. On a personal / professional level, I've been very happy, apart from all of the homestaying and everything. But Iranians, we've been through difficult times for the past 43 years. So we grew up this resistance soul. And through this resistance, we managed with my colleagues, Iranian colleagues from all around the world, and also in Iran, we did 3 different projects, international projects, which really we made an effort, and then we got the results, and we are very happy about it. So, and all of them for free, first of all, as a volunteer basis. But then these were the things that really moved everybody around us in the world, because they've been seeing that everybody in the world are having a difficult time, yet these crazy people from Iran, from somewhere that is always having this devious connotation in the news around the world, are making projects are making things happening. Like in the first month of COVID, in March 2020, we created with a friend of mine from Iran, with their company, and another from the United States, Iranian, based in New York. We created the first online performance festival named Reconnect Online Performance Festival, which we curated almost 75 shows within 1 month of programming. And all of them, we were not streaming shows. We were just boosting people, endorsing people, encouraging them to create shows for free to bring solidarity between the artists around the world. And then after that, I created this network that Jana and Cindy both knows about. This is the first network in the world connecting the people, let's call it this way, the people who are working in the field of distributing an artist's work, like circulating an artist's work, whether they call themselves producer, distributor, or agent, because all around the world, people have different terminology for these people, for us. So this was a network that now the members of the network exceeds over 85 people from plus 30 countries. And this was the second project. And the third project was last June, which we created the first Iranian online showcase, performing arts showcase. And through that, like, it was a 6-month job. We worked on a volunteer basis, naturally, to bring Iranian artists to international curators and programmers to watch their shows, because usually it's been very hard, even for the main festivals, to bring them. And then it was the first time that it was happening on an independent basis. So I'm very happy of the result of it, bringing 75 artists to 85 professionals from around the world, and then making an editorial of 356 pages as an online catalog. I'm very, very proud of the team that I have and their support and everything that we did all this.
Thank you. I came online to see some of the stuff. It was incredible. The amount of work that went into that, that festival in such a short amount of time is just, it's a lot of sweat and tears. I could tell. David, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, let me first say, it's a perfect example of, when we go into this business, we have no idea what we're going to encounter, but we also learn that we need to know a lot about a lot. So from both sides of the business, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be an accountant, you need to be an advertising executive, you need to be a marketing director, you need to be a graphic designer. I mean, and I guess if any of us had known what we needed to know, we would have taken different courses in college. But over time, you just learn.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've always said I don't know how many businesses that you have to be as diversified in what you need to know in order to do your job. But in pertinent to our topic, I also don't know how many businesses that have as many trade shows and conferences as the entertainment industry.
Right.
I've said, it's probably an exaggeration, but in reality, you could probably be at a conference every week.
Yeah.
Just because, not in addition to what we're talking about here, the performing arts conferences.
Yeah.
I mean, the amusement park business has a conference.
Yeah.
The fair business has not only a national conference, but every state has a fair conference. The event industry has a conference. And all of these are related to what we do representing talent.
Yeah.
If depending on what types of talent, and I've participated in and exhibited at most of those over my career.
Yeah.
Even I'm just thinking like NACA, which is for colleges. Every state has a NACA conference, and then there's a national NACA conference. So but the other side of that is, we talked earlier, you meet people at some of these conferences, and then you see them again year after year after year, and sometimes month after month after month, that you become friends with. And that to me is one of the important aspects of our business.
Right.
As far as the past 2 years, I mean, I told all my clients in March of 2020 that I didn't see business coming back until September of 22. Based on what I had read and medical and government officials, and knowing our business, that people book a year in advance, and knowing that in the conferences that I was on, or the webinars that I listened to, everybody who had shows booked in 2020 was going to move them to 2021. So the amount of new business I see very little. And then ultimately, the majority of those shows didn't happen, and people were moving them to 2022. So things that we had that we moved, but as far as new business, I didn't really anticipate new business. And that's pretty much, for me, proven to be the case. But after as many years I've been doing this, I'm not in, it was fine. It was okay with me, though I would still sit at my desk every day and make phone calls and send emails and attend webinars, and because that's what else was there to do. But now, and I have a very different picture, an opinion of the conference business, because I firmly believe it's an in-person business. It's literally putting names and faces together.
Right.
And I think we missed that, and have missed that over the past 2 years.
Right.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, and just to add to this, I totally agree with you. And it also, the one thing that is not happening online is the talk at the elevator or at the coffee machine. Everything that happens beyond or besides of the actual conference. I mean, I can attend an online conference or talk like we have right now, but maybe I walk out and I grab a coffee and I meet someone at the coffee. This is all of that sides. It's like when you have a stage and you see the performance, but everything that happens around, there is a lot of stuff happening. And like from my experience, my personal, yes, I took a lot from the speeches and I took a lot from the panels, but I actually took a lot from just randomly meeting or bumping into people, having absolutely conversations I would have never expected to have. And that whole package, part of that package is not translatable into this kind of online version. Maybe there is, we talked about it earlier, maybe if we all would have glasses and we walk into a metaverse conference room and at one time, who knows, it could be but still then I'm at home bumping into my, wall because I'm trying to, do something. But it's, I think that part is so essential. For me, that was one of the reasons why I went to ISPA, for example. Just, to everything around it. And that's why I agree. For me also, by the end of the day, it's an in-person thing. Like, it has to be live.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm trying to remember Cindy and I met, we went out to dinner. So I forget who coordinated the dinner, but didn't we go for Chinese food?
Yes, that was with Tim. Tim Wilson arranged that. Yeah, and that was as part of WA. And so I think that's I think just thinking back of, certainly we, all three of us have not been in this business for 50 years. And so I think there's so much to learn from you, David, because I don't know what that was 50 years ago. Like, we came into this business already where there was already internet and connection, but then that was still very much like it was, every year everyone prepped for the conference, right? Everyone, their entire season and the entire year circled and cycled around how we prep for the conference, what we prepare for the materials, we sign artists based on these conference seasons of when we were going to launch these artists. But now that this has all been kind of, that this has all been just thrown out the window because of the pandemic, everyone's looking sort of like, well, what's going to happen now versus what's going to happen in the future, and how everyone's going to, how the conference is going to be changing even how we do business if we can't meet in person. Or, so many conferences are thinking about the hybrid version now, right? I've heard so many conferences that are just now moving forward, they're going to have the in-person, but also the online version as well. But as we recently, have all experienced, whether it's through ISPA or APAP or some other form of hybrids, we are starting to see that kind of hybrid may not always be, there's a lot of cracks in that already, that it's presented itself. And so I guess I wanted just to open it up to you guys to see sort of like, what are your takeaways so far? Like, what have you attended actually this last 2 years? Was it all just online? What did you have a combination of hybrid? What was your experiences? I mean, I certainly didn't do a lot, even the online stuff. Again, it just all comes down to also cost, right? Even though it's substantially much more inexpensive to attend the online version, but it's like after a while, there's no way I could be staring at my screen for like 2 weeks at a time with these back-to-back conferences. Like that's just not, I just can't do it. Like mentally, I just like my eyesight has gone so poor these last 2 years because of that.
Well, I've attended pretty much every conference that's over the past 2 years that was available.
Wow.
But I found them for the most part, unproductive.
Right.
I actually, the most productive things between ISPA and APAP were the networking sessions, mm-hmm. or the speed dating sessions, where you could literally have 5 uninterrupted minutes with a presenter.
Yeah.
And in those 5 minutes, I thought that was actually maybe even better than in person.
Right.
Because it was just no interruptions and no noise. It was just, you could talk for 5 minutes. And I'm not sure why. I mean, I've been asking friends of mine, particularly from APAP, again, the use of the streaming formats for me are still complicated. And people, and I'm guessing that may be the case for a lot of people. I know that at APAP, I had a booth, but I still don't know how to talk to somebody when they're in my booth. And I've asked other people, and they didn't know either. I do, and I talked to people who didn't even know how to determine how many people came to their booth and who they were. And I had figured out. The reality is, in some cases, the Facebook forums have been really, have been helpful in communicating information to people. But I can tell you, for example, we're still waiting for APAP, I believe, to provide us a list of attendees that includes all of their information. The last list that went out several weeks ago had mm-hmm. nobody's phone numbers.
Oh.
And I actually asked my assistant this week. I said, when you call APAP to find out, because we had bought a booth and everything, and we're supposed to be getting some money back. So I said, when you call them, also ask them when we're going to get an actual updated, corrected list of people who were there.
Right.
So in my perspective, and I think, Cindy, you make the point, I don't know how many presenters were going to sit for all those hours.
Yeah.
And communicate. So which is why I think the in-person is so important. and we can save this for a little later in the call, but I have issues with the conferences in general, because over time they seem to have taken away opportunities to do what Jana said, be able to interact with people, not on the trade show floor, but so the social events that used to be are being cut back.
Yeah.
So, whereas some of the conferences still have, AIBA, I think I wasn't able to go to AIBA this year, but they have where they would just have lunches or breakfasts where people could sit down at a table and meet and interact over a meal. And those don't seem to be as prevalent in the performing arts conferences. So I don't know. My intention was to be in New York this year to go to both ISPA and APAP, and then when APAP canceled, it didn't make any sense to go. And my wife is overly protective of my being out in instances where I can be exposed to COVID. So
right.
So we're trying not to go, but we've been I've traveled. We went to New York in October of last year, and then went and saw a couple of shows, and we're there we were there for a different type of conference. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we figure out that hopefully that we can get back to in person.
Yeah.
APAP supposedly, it was interesting. APAP originally had been told that the Hilton wasn't going to let anybody into the hotel unless they were vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And then that disappeared somehow. Mm-hmm. And also there was a second conference in the hotel at the same time. So the possibility of being exposed to people who were unvaccinated and the like became more of an issue.
Yeah. Right.
But at the end of the day, I think, hopefully, and again, we have no control over what our governments are going to be doing as far as travel and the like. But my hope is that there will be conferences again.
Yeah, for sure. And Sepehr, you had different. You were planning on going too, right? Like you were planning on going to ISPA, going to New York, like all of us. And then but your reason was you couldn't get your visa, right?
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah. Because we don't have any American embassy in Iran. And I had a Schengen visa traveling in Europe. So I thought, okay, even though that I know as an Iranian, after Trump, he banned 5 Muslim countries, including Iran. So I've been thinking, okay, if there's even 1% chance for me to get the visa and attend ISPA, I'm going to do it. Because, I'm the crazy Iranian guy. So I went to the American Embassy in Munich in Germany, applied for it. It was very funny because I applied for in Paris, in Brussels, and in Germany. I've been traveling all these 3 countries. And then finally on 1st of November, when I was returning home, as in Iran, from Germany, after I passed the checked in and the passport control in the Munich airport, I got this email from the American Embassy. Hey, there's an appointment available if you want to take. I went to the website, I saw, okay, it's 17th of November and I'm already past the checkpoint, so I can't return. Oh. I'm gonna go home and then fly back to Munich again. So I just said, okay, I'm gonna get it. And then it was 17th of November or 18th of November. I came back home, I bought another flight immediately. I went back to Munich, I applied for the visa, and then they said there's a lack of one document which was not written on the website. And I just, okay, I'm gonna send it to you on email. And I sent it through the email, and since then I have no news from the embassy. So I don't even know if they rejected me or accepted me. So because there's simply no news from it. So that's, I guess, c'est la vie, no?
No, I mean, it's, the interesting thing is that we all thought COVID was our problem, traveling and all the restrictions, but it's so interesting in a, not in a funny way, to hear that, yeah, there are still other problems.
Obstacles.
Oh my God.
But I think
yeah, absolutely.
This is a bigger thing, right? I think for us living in you know, like in Western Europe, or us as American citizens, our US passport is almost like gold card, right? It's like we could basically travel the world without too much of a hassle. Like it doesn't really, for a lot of Americans, it doesn't dawn on us like how actually challenging it could be for other people in other nations to just travel across borders. And this also comes back to the point of that, yes, the in-networking, you know, the in-person meeting is really important. I think that face-to-face is so, you can't, nothing can replace that, right? Like, just like nothing can replace a live performance. Like we all agree with that. But at the same time, is that given that there are these border restrictions, does it also mean that we're only able to meet when we meet in person? We're only able to meet with only so few people because of how people can travel. And that also extends into financial concerns too, right? Like financial, your budgets and how you're able to even get to these countries because of all the registration costs, the hotel costs, the entertainment costs of going out for drinks and dining. You know, if you're not part of, like, on the presenter side, you have an institution that is able to cover your cost. However, if you're like us as a commercial agencies, these are all costs on us. And how do we amortize these costs, right? Or unless you're not, or if maybe sometimes if you're with a European countries, you can apply for funds that allow you to come and attend these. But, you know, countries like us in the US, we don't have that capability. And so I'm just thinking, like, yes, in person is, nothing can replace that. But how can we use the online, you know, as a platform to, how can we maximize this usage so that more people can connect in a much more efficient, productive way, right? Like, I think we're at the cusp of that right now, is that, and I think all the conferences are talking about having hybrid of some sort, you know, in person. But the problem, as we saw, and you could probably, you know, you could probably share your experience too, David, is like, I was talking to people that was attending ISPA, like the people that were physically there, they're like, yeah, it's not that we don't love our colleagues online, but we're so busy. We totally didn't go online to interact with the delegates online because we were out and about. No one's going to spend, like, you know, who's going to have time to get online on their devices?
Correct.
And it doesn't even make sense. You know, why would you walk around in New York with someone talking next to you and then say, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go on my device and go in and online? It doesn't make sense at all. So honestly, from my point of view, I mean, now that we're kind of getting back, like we're in this in-between thingy already, because we can go back a little bit, like with like in person, and it will become more and more and more. But at the same time, I think it needs a very smart reconsideration of how to connect both sides. So far, it has been either or. And I just thought, when you said that earlier, I was like, imagine a pandemic in 1985, you know, where all this was not possible. I mean, then we would have all been stuck at home and probably add just another thing on our list of, I love that list that we are all marketing managers and graphic, whatever we do. So I would have turned into the weird, like, worst artist ever, probably starting painting whatever no one wants to buy at some point. But, you know, I think we're in this in between right now. And so the question is, I think it needs a really, really very thought through consideration how to connect both sides. Yeah.
Right.
I think we need to analyze it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I've been just saying we need to analyze it from two different aspects, two different layers, one anthropological aspect and the technological aspect. So we need to, while the technology is developing, the people, the society is still resisting. So I totally agree that while I'm walking to a bar, I wouldn't have time to go online to talk with somebody else. But then still there's something that I can do. I need to find it on a personal level. I need to become more flexible, more resistant to this thing. Sorry, not more resistant, more flexible to, you know, the technology is moving. I should move. At least we should meet somewhere in between. So sorry, David, you were.
No, I was going to say that the reality of what we're dealing with at the moment is it changes the dynamic in the business greatly, because one of the benefits of being in person is they have showcase opportunities where presenters can see artists in person.
Right.
And there's a much greater chance when you see someone in person that you could hire them. And there's also an opportunity that's not presented in any other way for up and coming artists or unknown artists. So in the online dynamic, I'm not sure how an artist or even an agent or manager who's new to the business, how they communicate what they do and who they are to presenters in order to break into the marketplace. You know, the world has changed greatly in our business, particularly with over the past 20 years, the advent of American Idol, America's Got Talent, The Voice, and even the reality shows, and now even theaters are presenting podcasts live. So all of that is taking away from the live, the talent business, right? Because theaters, can only present so many shows.
Yeah.
And just as a side note on that, I always find it interesting, and this is just again an issue. I could talk on this subject for days. The conferences, in my opinion, don't serve anybody as well as they could. But for example, I always have said, just in conversations, the badges that the conferences give us are, first of all, particularly at my age, hard to read. Number one, usually you get a first name very large, a last name smaller, and where they're from even smaller. But I've always felt that if they could add to the badge, first of all, they could make it larger and more readable. But if they added 2 bits of information, the venue size, if you have, how big is your theater, and how many shows you do per year, because there are presenters who do 4 shows a year. And that. But if somebody walks by and it says they do 10 shows a year and their venue seats 200 people, in a one-on-one selling operation, you can say, okay, I have 0 shows that'll play to 200 people, or I have I have 1 person. I mean, like that was for me in the one-on-one that I did at ISPA and APAP. I got, in one case, I got the number 2 person in the dance department at Kennedy Center. Well, I represent, for the most part, no dance. I think my Chinese acrobats could be considered possibly in that field. But I represent Michael Motion, who's a performance artist juggler, who is the only variety act to ever do a great performances PBS special under the banner of Dance in America. So that was what I pitched for those, in that conversation. But the reality is, I talked to a venue theater the other day who said that they're doing a bunch of podcasts live.
Wow.
So, and there you're competing against, the benefit obviously is a podcast that's running weekly. Every week they're pitching, we're going to be on tour, go to our website and come see us live. That just makes our job harder.
Yeah. And I guess that is the reality, right? Like of these, of the U.S. sort of the landscape of what the presenters are presenting across America. And I think that's another separate issues of what we're all facing. But I think it's, like you said, the showcasing too. And I agree. I think showcasing is such a great opportunity. And I always like to play the devil's advocate. But again, like for artists to want to be able to showcase, which, you know, when I apply for pitch sessions and whatnot, but I also have to, like, I've also had artists who just says they can't apply because they don't have the money to go and do the showcasing, even if they're selected, unless of course it's like ISPA, where I can go and represent on their behalf to pitch the shows. I mean, and again, like just even taking Sepehr as an example, you know, like what happens if you know, like how is it possible for someone, if one of your theater company wants to apply for a showcasing or a dance or music from Iran to go showcase in the US, like that is just, that in itself is not possible. So I think for us, it's like, is there, you know, again, I'm just looking at like, how can we look at this medium where, I mean, Sepehr, you certainly did that, you know, like, I mean, again, like you said it, you know, I never knew I just knew Iran is culturally very wealthy, like in terms of what the art and the history has to offer. And there's amazing talent. But I didn't even see the depth of that until you had that network, you know, when you offer that to us, because where would I have access to those kind of information? And so like thinking beyond is like, how can we, you know, like how can we use these kind of platforms, like, or maybe it's something that is offered in between, you know, over the years of what we pay as membership, right, David? Like, you know, aside from the annual conferences that we attend physically, these trade shows, and we pay a yearly membership and then the registration fee, and then for our booths, like we're not getting anything else throughout the year.
Well,
right?
I would just very quickly that there were a number of comments during the speed dating sessions,
right,
about that people said this should be a monthly event,
right,
that presented an opportunity that was, you know, which if more people would participate in, mm-hmm. that was beneficial to our business. But mm-hmm. but I'm just curious for Sepehr, for the festival that he did, how did he find all those artists? You know, unless they were people he knew from before the pandemic. That's the part of the challenge we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, some of them I knew. Sorry, Jana, go on.
No, I just wanted to say, so actually it's just like taking best of both worlds, right, and, you know, combine it. That's all I wanted to say. It's like, I agree, there's like speed dating things once a month, or even like, you know, kind of small group is fantastic. And then you meet up twice a year for the in-person conference. So just like a very, very, I don't know, rough structure could already be a good starting point, I would say. Sorry.
Right.
But that's for sure. That's definitely, because this is when we're talking. Let's say we're talking about many different discourses throughout these years, specifically during the past 2 years about sustainability, inclusivity, feminism, and all of the other discourses that we've been talking. And then also like not being exclusive in our festivals, but then like having these kind of conferences and art fairs and markets all around the world with all of these non-balanced, let's say, political and cultural and social situations. So this has been always in our mind within the agency. That's why, like what David was asking about, how did we reach all of those artists? Like, let's say, when they go to Shanghai for the Shanghai Arts Market, they are curating the 15 people. And they literally name it, China goes to the world. And then the world comes to China.
Yeah.
But then we didn't want that. We wanted everybody to have their voice, because it was, you know, when the state-funded festivals are doing the showcase in Iran, or probably any other, one of the biggest hassle is the visa. For example, David, I cannot invite you to come to the Iranian showcase in person because you're an American, you've got the American passport. That would be super difficult on many layers to invite you. But then we said, okay, but we're not going to do it as a state-funded festivals. We're just going to be inclusive. We're gonna publish an open call for all of the artists to apply for it. We don't care about the quality, we care about the artists' voices. But then we curated the film section. So that's how the film section was only 15 films based on the quality, based on the artist, based on the travelability, if there's such word exists. And then the other part, which included the pitch session and the presentations, we just gave the stage to everybody to bring the diversity. That's how we got 75 artists pitching almost like 85 shows from all the disciplines. Everybody was like fascinated by, oh my God, I never knew Iran has this and that, like contemporary circus, contemporary dance, contemporary music, drama, documentary music. And what we did, like David had answered to your question, was that with my colleagues, when we were talking, I said I don't want it to be geographically Iran. I want it to be the diasporic Iran. So I reached out to the friends that I made, Iranian friends who are residing outside of Iran for different matters, and said, hey, do you have a show? You want to participate and pitch your show? That's how I got Iranians from Australia, from New Zealand, from Germany, Canada, America, pitching their shows. And this was hard. As you mentioned, probably, I don't know, in-person quality would have been totally different. But then it wouldn't be as inclusive, and then everything. Like, one of the hassles is that in the state-funded festivals, in the main festival, when they do a showcase, they never share the emails of the guest unless you approach the guest and get the email yourself. While what we did was, in that 365 editorial that it gave to everybody, we posted with the permission of the guests all their names, all the disciplines that they program as a presenter in their festival or venue, so people would know whom to approach with their emails. And we gave it away. So this was something that I gathered during my 9 years of work, and I gave it for free to everybody, to 75 artists. And this was a free PDF. So if anybody wants it, I just give it to them with pleasure, because I do believe that, you know, we always keep talking about existence, yet what we forget about is coexistence. We are coexisting on this planet, not just existing, and sometimes having existential crises and thoughts. So in order for this coexistence to keep going, for this cog in this big machine, for the machine to keep going, we need to act like it, not just talk about coexistence.
Right. No, it's really true. I think, you know, in the US, our conference world and our model has almost like, I mean, it really goes back to, it starts off with that badge, right? Like what David said in the beginning. And I've been on committees and boards where badge is an issue. Like the size of the font, what gets put on those badge? Because it's a culture where, at least I could say, you know, David, you can also speak even further into this, is that there is this constant divide, right? Because everyone's staring at each other's badges, because that's the whole purpose. We're trying to find the people we're trying to pitch our artists to. But it creates this kind of environment where presenters just don't want to be found, right? Like the programmers, okay, in other, whether, you know, artistic directors, programmers, festival programmers, theater, you know, the one that makes the decision on which are the artists that are supposed to come to their venues, you know, they're the ones that wants to hide away from you. And then us as agents, the exhibitors are constantly trying to look for them. And then, you know, and then it's like, is this badge going to solve the problem? You know, but then you have this instances where people just like, and we have these jokes all the time, you know, we have like certain infamous presenters who will surround themselves with a posse of their staff so they can hide. And I think this is it, you know, I think this is like, can we culturally change that from place to place where there's even just a divide between these two, you know, one side to the other, right? How can these, you know, and I think that's one of the things, like Dave, you know, I don't know how what the conferences was, the experiences, you know, even 30, 40 years ago when you were attending versus now, even up until pre-pandemic. And you said it yourself, like there's so many problems that needs to be, that issues, like you said, I think you made a really good point, is that there's really, not all conferences are made equal, but not all conferences are perfect either, right? And I think everybody who attends needs to go into it very clearly. What is your goal of attending these conferences? But it's like, how do we close that gap between the two sides, the buyers and the sellers, right? If you want to put it in the lamest terms, like what can we do, like moving beyond, and how do we sort of reshape, right? Like what can we do within this whole conference mode, whether it's in person or online, to close that gap? Because regardless of where you go, whether it's in the US or Europe or other parts of the world, an arts market, these will always be two separate. I always feel like there's always a gap that somehow needs to be closed. And I'm not sure, I don't know if I have the answers, but maybe there is a way. How can we shift some of the way these models look like,
I think this could be a whole podcast on its own. And so let me just highlight a couple of my thoughts just to give you an idea. Firstly, the majority, again, if anybody thinks I'm wrong, you can feel free to jump in. The majority of presenters who work for institutions are not really concert promoters. I've always said, in order to be a concert promoter, you also have to be a gambler. And so many of my friends who are concert promoters are actual gamblers, some of them very large amounts of money. If you think about it, on the highest level, for, especially in the international markets, this is the conspicuous as well, but for someone to pay Lady Gaga $9 million for a single performance and gamble, number one, that the weather is going to be fine and because it's an outdoor venue, and that they're going to sell out the concert and they're going to get enough sponsors in order to make a profit on that. So that to me is, you have to have a mindset to be able to risk that much money with the potential return. And so many of the promoters, but in the performing arts market, where you have an administration or a city manager or whatever who is looking over your shoulder, and I always, one of the top theaters in the country, where the city manager said to the guy who runs the theater, you never buy a show that's going to lose money. So that's for that basis, they just run the same shows year after year after year, because the fans come back year after year after year. So the difficulty to introduce new people into those markets is a problem. From a standpoint of our business, I've always, it's a challenge. How do we get the buyers to come and to the trade show, number one, and to talk to each individual agent or manager, number two? The trade show, I mean, we've all been in trade shows where the trade show is running, but the aisles are empty. So where are the buyers? And we've tried in the past. I've been at a conference where every booth had a different color marker, and the presenters walked around with a card, and the person who got the most marks on their card won a prize. My wife, who's in a different business, but her company she used to work for, they would have a fishbowl with a drawing, and somebody would win a high-priced collectible piece of sports memorabilia. to me, it's systemic of the trade show, the organizations, not making it clear to the buyers that if it weren't for the agents and their money, there would be no conference. And as such, you really need to support them. But the other side of that is the marketplace has changed. So now, as we know, so many of the big agencies, especially, schedule meetings, I remember I was at a conference and I had two major agencies on either side of me, and the people would walk out of the booth to my left and look at their phone to see where their next appointment was, and walk and keep walking and never pick up their head and see what was going on. The other dynamic that I quote all the time is from a presenter standpoint is you don't know what you don't know. That the booth that they walk by because they didn't take the time to at least look for a minute may be an artist there that could sell out their theater.
Correct.
And I don't know how to change that without the conferences really changing how they operate, and really making sure that the presenters know that there are wonderful things that they may be missing if they're not paying attention. But I think it goes also to the fact that the presenters are just not paying attention. And I don't know the dynamic there.
Right.
Thank you, David. This reminded me of a discussion that Cindy and I last night we attended this session to listen to this session on the women in performing arts in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And at some point, the artists who were talking, they were from Iran, Egypt, Lebanon, and Palestine. They've been talking about the fact that first, before this, I forgot to say this. I really love the terminology of you saying the programmers need to be gamblers. I totally loved it. I'm gonna use it quoting you. So last night, what they've been discussing was about the programmers also rendering the works of arts that they are doing through the talking points, through the discourses that they're doing, in a way saying, okay, if you're from Iran, or if you're from Saudi, or if you're from Palestine or Lebanon, just make something political that goes well with our programmational approach for our funders, for our I can't remember the word in English. So yeah, this is like a, oh my God, this is like a big hassle if on a non-commercial layer. I mean, you talked about the commercial layer, but this also applies on a non-commercial layer. That many of these programmers are this censorship that we keep talking about, this is happening on another layer with another name, with rendering, it's like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely so much to unpack, right? Like as we think about how we engage with, with these conferences and trade shows moving forward, based on our experiences, and it all comes down again a lot to just budgets, travel restrictions, geopolitical situations, and I want to just open that space for everyone to be able to think, like, how can we use, even if we go back in person, right, how can we collectively reflect back to these trade shows and conferences what should be changed, how can we make it better, or how can we think beyond the physical, and how can we use the online presence to add value to our work, to make sure that our talents are being heard. And I think that's where, that's how why we're having this discussion today.
Right. I think for example, Zoom is a perfect example of technology, allowing us to have one-on-one meetings.
Yes.
Where you can see the person that you're talking to. And I think that, again, name and face comes from that. I think the bigger issue, and again, note that in America, in the performing arts market, we've lost 2 of the major trade show conferences.
Yes.
Both, PAE, which stopped a few years ago, and now as of this year, Arts Midwest. So there's really now we have APAP and we have WA.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of, there's some more regional small conferences. But on a large level, there's a great void now. I know that there's been conversations through NAPAMA of trying to create a conference. And keep in mind that APAP, everybody always asks, why is APAP in New York? When for so many people, if they moved it to St. Louis, for example, it could be much less expensive for everybody. Less expensive to get there, less hotel rates less expensive, convention space less expensive, everything less expensive, and that might get more people to come.
Right.
Having to go to New York in the middle of January when it can be 50 degrees or it could be 0 degrees.
Yes.
Is a challenge.
Right.
And for me, I always look at it as just a chance to go to New York. So there are for me to see shows and for me to go in the restaurants that I love and friends to see. I've gotten to the point where and let me just digress for 1 second. When I do a conference, I have a really simple financial dynamic. If I can sell 1 project or 1 show, generally pays for me to be there. But I have, limited, it's just me.
Right.
So I don't have the overhead of a company with employees and the like.
Yeah.
But so I'll go to the conferences just because there are other things that I can do while I'm there.
Yeah. That
make it worthwhile to me. But but again, I'm different dynamic than most people.
Yeah. But I think that's where Zoom comes in again. We didn't invent Zoom during the pandemic. It was there before, but we found a lot of things we could do, including Zoom into conferences and art market gatherings. So I think that's why the past 2 years added something onto all these issues we might as we said in this whole conversation, they're positive. The conference business, the markets business is a person business, but at the same time, we found Zoom or any other platform, just not to be too commercial about it, to have conversations beyond, or maybe even as you said, I'm a one person as well. So if I travel, if I have a whole business behind me, it might become difficult. And I think that's something just for the future. As we said earlier, there is the coexistence, and I think those two, the in-person and the online, have to coexist or should coexist. In what way? The best way? I think we haven't figured it out yet. I think we are on a good way, but I think that's a little bit of, let's say, if we take something good out of the last 2 years, that's what I said earlier. Imagine a pandemic in 1985. All of this would have not been possible. It would have been stuck at home reading books and writing books, probably out of complete boreness. I don't know. But I think that's a very good thing, and I'm really, really curious what it will add to the whole market or conference market once the pandemic goes into an endemic, I don't know how the English word, and once we go a little bit more back to normal, because I think we will keep a lot of this as we do, for example, home offices. That's not even a question anymore, really. Yeah. Before it was oh, you want to work from home? I don't think so. And now it's yeah, fine, go, bye. Yeah. Because we all know it works. Yeah.
Of course. Well, those of us who've I've been working from home for 50 years, so
there you go. Well, there you go.
But to my point, what interesting in this comparison. So the fair market, the international fair market, used to be in Las Vegas, and then it moved to San Antonio. Now, I haven't gone to San Antonio because it was far easier for me to get to Las Vegas, but I'm told that all of the superfluous people spouses, what have you, staff, don't go to San Antonio. Now, I think the fair is moving to a different city next year, but still. But the people who showed up were the people who do business.
Yeah.
And therefore, it turned out it's been a more productive conference for everyone. And again, this is things that I remember is I was talking to a presenter in New York at APAP, who doesn't present Broadway, but was thrilled by the fact that he had seen 7 Broadway shows during APAP. So he was there on his association's budget, but he wasn't there. And to me, that's a disservice to all of us.
Yes.
That, but I will say, and if I can share my screen again.
Yeah, hang on.
Hold on. Is it up? So this is an analysis I did from the 2020 APAP conference.
Oh, sorry, David, can you try again?
Oh, okay, hold on. Is it there?
No, try again.
Hold on. It's not working then.
Yeah, I don't know why. You're the host at the moment.
Oh, there, now.
Okay.
Just have to find it here.
There we go.
So this is an analysis I did from the 2020 APAP conference.
Okay.
And I can send this to you if you want to be able to put it up some other way. But it basically shows you the trade show hours.
Yeah.
But the other activities that APAP had scheduled during those same hours. And this is where it becomes, our job as agents to really hold the conferences accountable to how do we get the people to come to how do we get the people to come to the trade show when the conference is asking them to do other things at the same time? So
yeah,
it's frustrating because, and I have many agents who I've known for many years who say that these conferences are not run by people who run conferences.
Yeah.
And because the conferences and trade shows in the business where without the trade show there is no conference, they run very differently.
Right.
And I think it just behooves us to do our best to reach out to the management of conferences that we're attending and say, how do you help us do business so that we can continue to have the money to support the conference?
Yeah. I think this is where all the feedbacks, right? I think, I've been on boards of conferences, and even though you really only get like 50% of the people sending back feedbacks. And I think this is where we as delegates really also need to do our due diligence and continue to give feedbacks back to the conference and to make sure our voices are heard. Whether it's now, moving forward in the future, as we figure our way out of whatever format it's going to take shape into, in the future. Thank you both for such a titillating conversation today. This is such an important topic where it's about us getting together as an industry. And this is what makes our business move forward, right? It's our networking. It's about trading ideas, about exchanging ideas, and exchanging and continuing to keep our curiosity out there so that the artists, the projects that we represent or we work with continue to be heard. So really, really
Thank you
appreciate.
for organizing this, and I'm happy to be available for a different topic that fits what I know.
Oh, I
Thank
wrote
you.
down about 5 topics during this whole talk, so we'll definitely get back to both of you.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy
Thank
and
you.
Jana.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you
It's a
guys.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you everyone today for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you all on our next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed our conversation, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.